Well, the Terramite is back in its home with everything rebuilt on the back. And it's on to the next project. Well, two projects, but I'm waiting for someone to give me a cutting edge for the plow part. In the meantime, if you notice, I have some pretty aggressive tread on these back wheels. And the reason I have that is the winter time, instead of using snow chains, tire chains, I decided to try these. And they work pretty good in the winter. But boy, do they leave their impression in my grass in the summertime. So what happened is, I don't know if you can see it way up there, there's the two tires that I had on before. And those are more like conventional tires. They work pretty good in the summertime. But to do anything in the winter, they need the chains. I swapped them, but that's a pain in the neck. So what I'm doing now is I'm creating, I guess, a couple of rims so that I can just swap tires and rims without having to mount and dismount. What's happened is that I had gone to a tractor forum and was asking if someone had some spare rims to sell. And somebody actually had them, but I must have upset him because he stopped communicating with me. And I tried to find out why, but I got nowhere. So I said, okay, let me check with a local supplier. And they had the rims for $100 each. I was okay. And after 5 months, they said they had to order them. After 5 months, the price went up to $140 plus on each one. And the stubborn streak came out in me. So I said, nope, I don't want them for that price. I can do a lot of dismounts and mounts for that kind of money. So I decided I'd go find some in the junkyard. I have a friend that runs a junkyard. Well, it turns out that these are 6-lug, 6-inch rims. They're agricultural rims, 16-inch. And that's a pretty difficult thing to find in a commercial junkyard. But I did find some 16-inch rims that I can mount the tires on, but they're 8-bolt. I think they're either Ford or Chevy. So I decided I'm going to build a new hub for the center of them. Now I have to tell you right now, this is not how you should do it. You should go buy them. This is a project that I'm using around my house. It may or may not be the right way. Well, it probably is not the right way. But I figure I'm only going a few hundred feet at a couple miles an hour. And if I lose a tire or a wheel and I hit the ground, it won't matter too much. But you really have to take and understand the consequences of doing something like this and making a bad weld or using too thin a metal so that it flexes and cracks. So I'm going to show you in the basement how far I've gotten, and we'll go from there. So this is where I've gotten so far. These are the rims. They're actually a little wide, but I think I can still mount those tires on them. Standard 8-bolt pattern. I need 6. So I had taken some of this steel, and it was much bigger. I made sure it was big enough. Laid out my holes. Did a really good job on one. The other one, there's 2 holes that aren't quite in the right spot. But again, for what I'm doing, shouldn't matter. The rims usually mount inside out so that the valve stem's on the inside. and I'm going to keep it that way. Now these are cut. You can't quite see it, but I had pulled one of the tires off, one of the wheels, and marked on here where the hub comes to. So I wanted to make sure these would at least fit over the hub. Probably should have left a little more metal, but that's alright. I can still make them work. I also cut these two different ways. I should have cut them this way. This was the second one. So I cut 8 sides to clean it up, which corresponds with the 8 holes in here, which is pretty good. So now it's mount this, and this is not the right sequence, but mount this, cut out the other stuff. This has to be the inside. And what I'm thinking of doing, I had turned a couple of blocks on the lathe. One fits this, and one fits this, so that I can keep it centered when I tack it on. And it's not all the way in, that's fine. What I figure on doing is there are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 8 raised areas here. But they correspond pretty close to where this lip is, which is pretty good. So I'm going to tack this in place. If you notice, it's a little high. It's hitting. So I've got to cut this down. I'll take the grinder to this so that this will fit flat on here. Tack it in place, then look at the back side and figure out how to clean out around the holes. I think what's going to happen is I'll end up using a hole saw centered on these that's just big enough to use a socket, and I'll try to leave all the material that's here. But that remains to be seen. We're going to find out pretty quick. I'm going to go outside and grind this down and make this fit, and we'll see what I end up with. Since there are 8 ribs in here, and I cut this 8-sided, I'm going to try to put the rib in the center of where I cut. That should make it sit a little flatter. Again, if it's slightly oscillating, you know, I'm in the yard. Where am I going with it? Yeah. Let's see if I got a good ground. That's the thin 6013, getting rid of that. Going with eighth inch. That did not hold. My stick's turning colors. I'm still a little over current, I guess, even with the bigger rod.
I turned the rim to get a better shot, but...
Okay, we're back inside, and I have to explain a few things after reviewing the footage so far. These 8 little ribs that were sticking up, you watched me grind them as much as I could to get the paint off of them, and then I took this whole piece and cleaned all the paint off of that. So I made sure that I had good contact all the way around. I then had to grind these welds back so that it would fit on the hub of the tractor. Then you can see this looks a little rough. Well, that is because when I was done welding on the other side, this rim had a slightly larger diameter, if you remember the piece of wood that had a step in it, than the bolt pattern that I had created. So I had a perfect lip right here all the way around where I could weld. So now this piece with the 6 bolt holes in it is welded really well. You can see the 8 spots here on the outside and continuous around here. And I only have to clean up just a little bit on here, which is fine. That will make it nice and snug. And it also reinforces the fact that it's pretty square to the rim, I guess you'd call it. So now the next bit of work is to, and some people said, oh yeah, well, I had a friend, relative I guess you'd say, he said, why don't you use a MIG welder? I could use a MIG welder. I actually have a dual use MIG and flux core, and I've got flux core in it now. I grew up with stick welding. You know, I've been stick welding for over 50 years. And you know, you use what you get used to. I've done some flux core, but it's a cheap little machine. Even though I've got it on 220, it gums up when you use high duty cycle or high current. And I think this stuff is just a little too heavy for it. So I'm doing my stick welding instead. So now what I have to do is I have to take and drill through these 6 holes, see where they come out, maybe drill them out to the size of the stud, put a stud through, and then see what I need to cut around it. I haven't decided if I'm going to try to use a hole saw or just use a cutoff wheel and cut squares on the back side and get rid of some of that. Just don't know yet. I guess I'm going to have to wait and see what I get to. Remember, this is on the inside up against the machine, the hub, so the other side has to have enough space to put the bolts through. And since I use an impact normally, it has to be a fairly large hole. I may have to temper that. We'll see. Okay, so that's where we are. The next step is I'm probably going to drill these out on the floor. So I won't bore you with the drilling part of this. A little bit of trial and error here. I tried several things. This is the lower piece down here. Now I could have just simply cut right on the inside, but that would leave only that flat piece for support. I'm trying to leave as much of this original as possible because it's welded in here, and I'm trying to make it so that a impact wrench fits there, and you see I'm having some trouble. I tried my little 4-inch with a cutoff wheel. That's how I did some of this. Chisel, a couple of chisels. I tried a, I don't know if I can find it, one of these. It's elsewhere right now because it's loose. I guess this is it. Tried to use this, which is a boring system, and it's too big. I can't get it small enough, the diameter. But I have several of them, and I think I'm going to try one of these next. Have to be a little careful. It's a very irregular surface. But what I think I'm going to end up doing is to take a bolt, put it through this here, and center the drill through it so that I can get a hole coming up centered. Then I can use this also as a center for these hole cutters. I tried the cheap hole cutters that are the type that you use on an arbor, and I took the best one I had, but even those, this is not it. I had a Black & Decker one, but I tried it and it dulled the teeth pretty quick. These are better for wood or aluminum maybe, but they're not doing very good on the car rims. So that's where we are. The next shot, I've tried 3 or 4 different options. Now I'm going to try something else, a little more prep work. The next step I decided was I need to drill some pilot holes and center them. That was easy, I thought. I would take my centering punch, stick it in the hole, and it automatically centers, and I could put a little mark in there. Well, that seemed to be okay, except that a couple of spots on this rim, they're certainly not flat because there's all kinds of ribs and everything. So then I tried to drill them with a regular drill. That didn't work. I then tried to use a center drill, and it it didn't matter. It tried to walk. I'll end up snapping a tip off. So what I am doing now is I'm going on the lathe and I am drilling a 1/2 inch bolt out with a 17/64 drill bit. And then once I put the bolt in here, I can just rest the bolt in because it's basically the same size. I can drill through with this, and that will give me a center hole. And I can get up to a 1/2 inch at that point, put the bolt all the way through, and then try to use one of these devices. Only I'm probably going to have to go a little bit bigger. I think this is more than 17/64. But that's where I'm headed so far. We'll see what happens. Using a collet with the 1/2 inch bolt and drilling it out. We'll get there in a minute. And that pretty much assures me that it's going to be centered in that 1/2 inch bolt. Bolt's longer than I thought. This is I think a 1946 or 1947 South Bend lathe. This is the one I just made a backing plate for the 3-jaw chuck. I have a couple 4-jaws on the floor, but every now and then a 3-jaw comes in handy. So, oops, and as expected, the bolt loosened up in the collet because it's just a little under a 1/2 inch. So, let's put the back gears in. Come on. And tighten it just a little more. Put the back gears out. I like an 1.5 bolt. And I'm about at the end of the throw of the tailstock. I'm going to have to reposition here. Yep. And it's through. Alright, we'll see how that does as a guide. The bolt was a little small, so I just wrapped a couple layers of electrical tape around it. And we'll see if that keeps it pretty well centered. I think I gotta stop. I decided not to drill the hole out all the way to 1/2 inch and use the bolt as a centering pilot. This bit here is also, it looks like 17/64 because it fit right in the hole that I had drilled through the center. So I'm simply using this and cutting away the piece that I need. And it's noisy, it's chattery a little, but it's going. It's a little slow. So I think this will be the way to do it. It's going to take a while. So there's the hole that I just cut out. Wasn't too bad. Took a while, made a lot of noise, and it kept loosening up. So I had to retighten it a few times, and it's just slightly undersized for an impact socket. So with a little, I'll take my air drill and the reamer, and I'll ream that one out. I'll probably ream these out too, so that the socket can fit. So on to the last two, and I'm going to try a different, something more like this that has less surface area, because at that angle it has to take and chip away at an awful lot. So we'll see how that goes. Okay, so here we are. I think I'm done with this part on one rim. You can see there's 6 holes, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, all the other stuff is in there. Looks ugly, I don't care. It's for my work tractor in the yard. And by leaving all this extra stuff, this piece of steel that I've welded on has a lot of extra support. I mean, it's welded here, 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 and here. So if I were to cut it back, I'd have to figure out how to reinforce it. Didn't want to do that. So now it's mount the tire, see if it holds air, see if, well, actually put it on the hub of the tractor, see if it does fit. These are all turned out so that I could use an impact wrench. Every single one of them will take the impact wrench. And how I finally got there, which was a lot, it was a long road to get there. I tried a lot of different things, but what I ended up doing is drilling out the steel from the backside to 1/2 inch, which is what this bolt is, and the holes for the wheel, for the studs, are actually just a hair bigger. So to center it, you probably can't see it, but I have a piece of wire in the threads. Let me undo it here for a minute. There's the wire. It's a coil, almost looks like a helicoil, but it's just a piece of hardened wire. Wrapped it around, made it nice and centered. And there's the hole that I wanted centered in there. And that was then used with this to cut all the stuff away just the right size to get my impact wrench in. Worked out really well once I figured out what device to use after I tried at least 4 other different methodologies. So that's what we've got, and it's a nice day out. Maybe I'll bring the tractor over and I'll try the rim. I do have to probably clean in here a little from the weld, but it's minimal. It really is. So if this works, then I'll mount the tire, see how well the tire runs, and if that works out, then I'll do the other rim. And the other rim, of course, will be a lot easier now that I know what I'm doing. The modification to the first rim went very well. I put it on, it tracked pretty well, mounted a tire, the tires fit. So now it's on to the second one. I've already welded in the plate, both sides, did the center. So now it's on to the drill press, where we are going to knock out those holes. So that's next. 4 of these look straightforward enough in that I can use my little centering bolt, 1, 2, 3, 4, and leave a 17/64 hole for the back side to come through. However, this one and this one are overlapping with the original bolt hole. Those will be a little more difficult. I'll tackle those last. So right now is to get 4 little holes here, flip it over, and use this piece. Okay, 4 holes done. 1, 2, 3, 4. Again with the electrical tape to center it. This keeps it from spinning to melting the electrical tape. Try to keep some of the chatter down. Hi folks. I was watching where I was drilling the 4 holes on the second rim, realized it ended rather abruptly and that my shoulder was in the way an awful lot of the time. So I thought I'd just give you a little summary of what I've been using on the actual drilling. This here is the bolt that I drilled a hole through that's just over 1/4 of an inch with a nut, and that is what I used without the nut to drill those 4 holes that were not interfering with the 2 original holes, so I had a nice clean shot. So I could simply drill through this center with a 9/64. Then this drill bit is 9/64. So I could flip the rim over, go through that hole, and cut with this cutter. I don't know if I can help out anywheres. I actually had to grind down a slightly larger tool cutter. It turns out that I broke the one that was in there, and it chattered a lot. There wasn't enough meat here. So, and I simply reground this to the way I thought it would cut the best. So I used that on those 4 holes. Just spun it in the drill press, clamped the rim down as much as I could to keep it from chattering as much as I could. The last 2 holes were a little different. I had to use my cutoff wheel to basically enlarge the hole where the lug nut was for the 8-hole setup, enough so that I could get the nut off of and into that spot and against my new flat spot, my new flat piece, and then thread this in from the bottom. So now I had a 9/64 hole that I could now put this in and chew the little bit that I needed to off. That chattered a lot more because, of course, I'm going through some spots that were already not there. But it did work. It was noisy. It was slow. But it did the job. It did what I needed. So I wanted to do that little extra explanation. If you had any other questions, you can leave them in the comments. I'll look at them. I'm not known enough that I have 60,000 comments that I have to respond to. If I get 3, I'll be lucky. But onward, you'll see the rest of this now, because I think right after this, since this was the second rim, I jump right outside. I don't show you mounting tires and stuff. I cleaned the rims really thoroughly. They came out of the junkyard. They were pretty rusty because the tires had come off the rim, so there was rust and other crud in there. But I cleaned them up really good, tested them for leaks, let them sit a couple days, so they were really fine. And so now you'll see me mount them. So that's it. Hopefully you'll find this all entertaining, and maybe it'll give you some ideas on how to handle issues that you come across if you're a maker or fabricator or whatever they call people like us these days. So on with the show. Thanks a lot. Well, I think we've come to the end of the journey on this. This is one of the rims, that's the other. One of these, and I'm not sure which, I know will go right on. It'll be really easy because I had the rim mounted already once to see if I had any run out or so forth. The other one, I didn't do that yet. So, mounted the old tires. They're pretty weather checked.
dried out, whatever you want to call it. They're holding air. The rims are dry. Got to get some valve caps. And of course, these rims really fit hard. They take a hammer to get them off. I'm going to wait on that rim because that's the one I have not tested. Well, that's two of the three. It fits over the hub. The 6 bolts line up, or lugs, whatever you want to call them. They're bolts, actually, I guess. All right, let's fire it up and see what it looks like spinning up in the air. I'd say that looks pretty good. Now we'll try the other side. All right, tire number 2. I'm being fairly careful not to actually get under the equipment. The stabilizer is up, that's my jack. But I also have pressure, quite a bit of pressure on the bucket, so that's my backup. Wow. I didn't expect it that easily. I took the caps for the valve stems from the big Aggie tires and put them on here, so at least these are covered. And I hope I remember to get a couple new ones just for the spares here. This is the one I didn't try. Alright, that's one task. It's on the hub. That one's a little snug. That one needs a regular socket. Didn't make the hole big enough for a impact wrench. Well, regardless. Well, it's not bad, but I think I'm going to dismount it, take a look at the plate where I welded it, and see if I didn't leave a little too much weld material on. But I think for the purposes of what I'm doing, we're done. I hope you like this. As I said, this is my own use. I'm not a professional welder. If I was, I probably wouldn't have done this. So, and it's only, as I said, it's only for my yard. I wouldn't be doing this on a piece of equipment that I hire out. And it's how I do it. It's not how it should be done, I'm sure. But it works. It works for me. So that's it. Hope you like it. I'm going to see what else I end up with on the channel. I have enough projects. It's a matter of whether or not they're worth recording. But hope you like this, and yeah, give me some feedback if you want. We'll see what happens. Thanks a lot.